Hello everybody and welcome. We're back in Kerbal Space Program 2 and today we're going to attempt a very complex mission, a Jool-5, where we visit all the moons of the gas giant Jool. But definitely not like this. Again! Alright, attempt number 2 with this launch vehicle, and yeah, as you can see here, there might have been some problems with the structural integrity here, because this thing here is very wobbly indeed. So that does not bode well, does it? Again! No, it did not, but in this case here, all the struts are now in place, the rocket is flying straight like an arrow, and we're finally punching through the cloud layer. So, what is a Jool-5 again? Well, there's the gas giant Jool in the Kerbal system, and it has 5 moons, them being Laythe, Vall, Tylo, Bob, and Paul. And the Jool-5 mission is where you send one launch vehicle, or one vehicle from Kerbal orbit, and visit all 5 of those moons. And that's exactly what I'm attempting here. You might already have noticed the spaceplane in front of this thing. That's not just there as like a hood ornament or something, it's there for Laythe, because Laythe is a planet with an atmosphere. Well, not a planet, of course, a moon. A moon with an atmosphere, and therefore we're going to use that plane to ride that atmosphere and use it to get down and save some fuel in the process. What we can also see here, the process of unrolling the new gigantic solar panels that are new with Kerbal Space Program 2. What's also new for Kerbal Space Program 2, if you watch the news around the game, is that since Wednesday this week, there is a new patch available. Patch number 2, or also version 0.1.2 if you want to be pedantic about it. And well, it improves a few things, it adds some other things, and I'm going to talk about that in detail in another video, probably on Sunday if everything goes well. This footage you see here, most of it is still shot on the previous iteration. You can recognize that by looking at, by seeing the time warp indicator on the bottom, because that was a bug that was introduced with the previous patch, where you would see that time warp UI element, even if you press F2 to get rid of all the UI in theory. What we see here is one of our crew members doing a visual inspection of the vehicle, and therefore we got out of our crew capsule, and we're just looking at this magnificent beast of a spaceship. We just saw the spaceplane up front, and now we're inspecting the Tylo lander, and also the Vall lander, and also the Bob and Paul lander. Well, at least that's the plan. Let's see what happens later. We also see these cone-shaped elements. Those are new parts. Those are power generators to get electricity when we're far away from the sun and the solar panels will no longer suffice. Well, maybe they do, those colossus, they're called, those giant solar panels. They're really huge, so maybe they work out there at Jool. We shall see, shall we? But now that we got that visual inspection done, let's head back into the capsule. Yes, we can also see the magnetic boots at work here. Nice little beauty shot of the ship, and then it's back to business. And we're already on our way to Jool, since we did our transfer burn earlier. First target is Laythe, and we're using one of the shortcomings of KSP2 to make this journey a little bit easier, because Laythe has an atmosphere, and we can use that atmosphere to, well, aerobrake. Meaning we use the atmospheric drag to slow ourselves down. And since the developers haven't yet included thermals, so there's no atmospheric heating, we don't need any heat shields or anything. We can just use the atmosphere to get there into a stable orbit. And that's what we're doing right now. Yes, we just had to use a little bit of fuel, but the majority of the braking was done thanks to the atmosphere. And now with the spaceplane released, it is time to get down and dirty on the sandy beaches of Laythe. Because not only does Laythe have an atmosphere, it also has water, or at least some form of liquid that looks like water. And therefore we can, well, we have to control our descent a little bit better, otherwise we land in the vast oceans of this planet, but we don't want that, we want to land on land, that's why it's called landing. Alright, first attempt at landing, and you notice the attempt that I just said? Well, here's why, this is just an attempt. Yeah, not that great. Again. Second one. Again. That wasn't good either. So I tried something because I noticed that the velocity you could plunge into water is a lot higher than if you plunge onto land. So the tolerances are greater. So as you can see here, I had no problem getting down into the water without breaking anything. Unfortunately, due to the wonky way that water is currently implemented, I'm kind of like a drunken flying fish right now, trying to get back to the shore. And yeah, this is stupid. Let's be honest about it. I just turned on infinite fuel to see if I could even make it possible, but again, yeah. No use there, so back to no infinite fuel and using the parachute on our back, but this time I timed it correctly and we have landed successfully. Yay for us! Unfortunately, there's another problem, because I can't get out. Yeah, due to the way I constructed this plane, apparently those little winglets up front block the cockpit so the Kerbal can't exit. And I'm not going to redo the entire mission, so yeah, we just have to deal with landing, not getting out, not planting a flag, and that's still counting, I hope. Anyway, back to orbit. We can... The interesting thing about Laythe is if you see Jool in the background and aim for that, that's perfectly on the equator, so you don't really need the instruments, you just have to eyeball it and keep Jool in the center of your screen. And here we're already in orbit, and then we're doing our rendezvous with our mothership. This is something that was not possible yet with the previous version of KSP, with patch 0, so to speak, so the initial early access version, because the maneuver nodes back then were completely broken. Well, not completely broken, you could do very, very simple stuff, but rendezvous like this, nah, I was not really able to do that correctly before patch 1, and here I had to adjust my trajectory a little bit because I was afraid I would crash into my mothership over there. You might have noticed I am not naming my ships anymore. Earlier in my, if you can call it a career, YouTube career, I tried to find some cool names for my ships, but I've constructed so many since I started, I kind of ran out of names. So if you want to give this contraption a name, please write it in the comments, let me know what you came up with. I don't know, like Orange Menace or something, or Big Balls of Hydrogen. Well, maybe also fire, because hydrogen turns into fire when you burn it. Oh, whatever. Let's get to Tylo. This is our next destination, and it's, well, it's the hardest of the moons. Not talking about its density, because, yeah, that also, but because it's high gravity. It's really big for a moon, and therefore its gravity is almost as high as Kerbin's, so landing there is difficult. Again, look at all those big, beautiful, colorful balls. Like a ball pit at McDonald's. Are these still a thing? Do these still exist? I haven't been in one in ages. Not a ball pit, a fast food restaurant. I kind of don't really like them. Anyway, we got our orbit around Tylo and doing our burn to get into a stable configuration, which has been done here. And then the game decided to drop my wings. Again. Fortunately, I had a save game where the wings were still attached and I redid all of that. So yeah, that's where we are now. And we extract our Tylo lander. So basically it's a universal lander, but it has some stuff attached for Tylo specifically. And that's what we're going to use here. So we're activating our engine once we're in a safe distance from the main ship. And then we're burning retrograde to get our orbit down. You may notice the resource manager window on the right. I just checked whether or not the fuel transfer is working correctly between the side tanks and the main tank, because that was an issue in the original release, but here it's working fine. Now we're at the stage where we need to stage those tanks, and yeah, staging kind of went weird because it turned off my engine. Which is not really how things should work. And I also had to stage like 2 or 3 times until those tanks were dropped. And I had to open the parts manager and then activate the engine, and that cost me so much time that this happened. Again! Yes, so after another try, I got it down correctly. You noticed on the bottom the parts manager is still open because I wasn't sure how the next stage would act, but fortunately, all is well, except that SAS wasn't turned on, so my path was a bit weird, and also the landing gear wouldn't open, so yeah, again. Thankfully, after reloading, the landing gear was working fine. No idea what was wrong the first time, but this time it worked, and I was able to touch down in a safe spot that was not on a steep inclination as before, so we did not turn over. There we go! Now that that is done, so the hard part is done, because the landing on Tylo is really difficult. You really need to ride the throttle and start from the correct altitude and so on. So a lot of experience necessary to get it right, at least in KSP1. I also think in KSP2. But yeah, I'm already so used to that kind of works nowadays. What didn't work was getting back to the ladder, because I forgot adding ladders. So dropped the landing gear, did a running jump, and then we finally were aboard again. So we did not have to leave a Kerbal stranded on Tylo. That would be a bummer. Again, resource manager is open, so I see my main center tank to see when that starts to drain, so I can ditch the side tanks, which will then be empty. So fuel flow. That's a difficult word. Fuel flow is working, and what didn't work was staging, at least not correctly. And then again, the engines were turned off. So it seems like if you use radial decouplers, you spin around very fast. By the way, the spamming of these pause unpause messages, that's now finally gone with patch number 2, so you won't be bothered by that anymore. Fortunately, I still had enough speed or velocity going on, so I did not lose too much altitude when finagling around with those thud engines. And here, another close call. I'm doing those rendezvous encounters a little bit too close for comfort in this mission. But it makes for good visuals, doesn't it? Okay. Prepare for another disappointment, because I tried to redock the lander and I hit a wall, like a invisible wall in space. I could not get into the center of my spacecraft. And I found out that that's probably due to the reason how I built the vehicle, because I used these tube parts that have like a floating node, and I used those to create an invisible center stack. But it seems like the game nevertheless created the colliders for the fairings around the tube part, even though I said I don't want any fairings, and that's why the Kerbal can walk in space. Jesus walked on water, Luke walked on sky, Kerbal walks on space. The literal spacewalk. Okay, now the only option that I have for a lander is my plane. So what you see me done before is transfer fuel back to the plane, because I brought some spare fuel. I planned on refueling the lander with a tank that I brought along for that. And now my maneuver nodes are no longer working. So how do I get to Vall? Well, eyeballing it again. This game, in the current situation that it's in, really forced me to fly a lot of things manual, without any assist, without any maneuver nodes or whatever. I just kind of went, that could work, and then did a maneuver, and if it didn't work, I had to reload the game. But in this case, I finally got an encounter with Vall, and here we are at that icy little moon of Jool. Look at that! And of course, we're doing the usual song and dance, doing our capture burn, and then we are using the plane to get onto the surface. Well, after we opened back up that cargo bay, because for some reason I closed it after docking it. I can't remember that I did that, but maybe I pressed Action Group 3 by mistake. That opens and closes the cargo base. Anyway, we are aiming for this little scar in the surface, because something new in KSP2 is that Vall has an underground ocean. So that's rather interesting, isn't it? And yeah, what's also interesting is that I could land on the tail fin, but when I spin around it still breaks. But yeah, we don't need the wings anymore, so they were just useless weight. Anyway, unfortunately those winglets didn't break, so I still can't get out. Maybe I should have kind of tried some crashing into my mothership that would break the winglets, but that was too risky, so I didn't do that. What I'm doing now here is trying to get into that crevasse and see what's down there. Speaking of icy moons and water on there and maybe potential life, when you're watching this video, the JUICE mission by ESA, the Jupiter Icy Moon Explorer mission, which is sending the largest spacecraft ever to the outer planets with the largest solar panels ever to the outer planets. There's a great video by Scott Manley about it, go watch that. He has way more detail than I can give you in this little segment here. So JUICE is going to explore the moons of Jool, of Jupiter of course, not of Jool. And maybe they also find some signs of life there, because there is ice water potentially. And we also believe that there are maybe some underwater, underground water deposits. So that mission is going to be very exciting when it arrives in many, many years at Jool. But for now, we are now in this, well, it can't really be water, it's too cold for water. So what type of liquid is that? Let me know in the comments. Again. Yeah, let me know in the comments. And also we try again, but this time we just do the regular equatorial burn, because I had to use a lot of fuel to get into the plane of that scar up top on Vall, and I wouldn't have had enough fuel to get back to the mothership. I just wanted to show you that new little addition to Vall, because I think it's really neat. And as soon as water is working again properly in KSP2, I might take something like, I don't know, a submarine or something there and try to explore that. Because there's, yeah, maybe something down there, I don't know. I haven't been there yet because we can't. Okay, docked back to the main ship, and now it's time to get to Bob. Bob is a bit hard to get to because it's, well, in a more or less steeply inclined orbit, at least a lot steeper than the rest of the moons of Jool. But if you do it correctly, then yeah, you get there. And you might notice the wings are now gone again, and I missed the moment where it happened, so I couldn't really gauge when I should reload the game. But I thought, okay, we don't really need the wings anymore. I wanted to keep them for optics' sake, but yeah. What you see here is, why am I not landing with the spaceplane? Well, the unholy undock Undertaker bug is back again, and well, it never really was gone. And yeah, I can no longer undock the spaceplane, so I have to perform the landing either with the main ship or with a crew member, and I decided to do it with a crew member. So that's why our Kerbal is now plunging towards the surface with its RCS. And if you noticed, when he exited the vehicle, he had full RCS, and when I switched back to him, he only had half a tank, even though I didn't really do anything with it in the meantime. So the game cheated on me, which is not nice. I lost half a tank of RCS EVA fuel without doing anything. So I decided to cheat back and activate infinite fuel for this segment of the journey where I get into orbit. So yeah, if the game is evil to me, I'm going to be evil to the game. Yes, I am petty. Anyway, I'm also back at the spaceship, and now we're going to get that poor crew member that had to endure all of that because he was in orbit quite some time until the main ship finally did the maneuvers to get him. Or her? I'm not sure. I can't really tell with these faces. I mean, the eyeliner kind of implicates it could be a female. But then again, maybe it's just a male Kerbal with some peculiar fashion choices. Hey, I'm not judging. Okay, now it's time to get away from Bob and into another plane, which is there for Paul. Paul is really far out away from the core of Jool, and therefore also a little bit difficult to get to, but we managed to do that. And fortunately, our maneuver nodes were back, so yay, that bug kind of turned itself off. What we also have is that we are now here on patch 2 already, if you haven't noticed, because if I'm in the UI-less view, so if I turn off the UI to have a little bit more beauty on the screen and look at those colors, Paul is really a sight to behold, isn't it? Anyway, with patch number 2, that bug where you had the time warp indicator on the bottom if you turn off the UI, that's now gone. But we have some other issues with that patch still. Next issue, again, is we don't have a lander, so this time I'm really attempting to land the entire ship. Balancing it on one engine, well, that's a bit of an ask, isn't it? Especially with a construction like this. If it weren't that tall and that, well, not really that wobbly, but yeah, the weight distribution is not really central because the plane is over there, the center of mass is not completely in the center of the column. Yeah, so I decided to drop a Kerbal, and while I exited the Kerbal, the vehicle decided to jump, which is not nice. And then I made a mistake. Instead of just leaving the Kerbal there and switching back to the vehicle and controlling it, I decided to, hey, maybe I can quickly plant the flag and get back without switching. But yeah, that was not really what happened here. So yeah, still not broken. Yet, maybe. So we can salvage that. I thought I could get on board while this thing was still bouncing around. And then it broke. Yeah, so we see something flying away in the background, and we see one of the engines that dropped. And then the solar panels getting destroyed, another engine, and yeah, this is now unsalvageable. Well, maybe a little bit, but I decided it was not worth the hassle. But still, hey, I managed to get back to the ship, so I can be in the same misery as my crew members. Again! Alright. Yes, I went back to the Kerbal landing method. This time we have, I think, the same Kerbal as previously. I forget their names, sorry. No, it's a different one, I think. The first one was called Bartley, and this is called Willman or something. I don't know, I forget their names. They die so often. I can't remember their names, I'm sorry. Anyway, we plant our flag. We now have flags on Tylo, on Bob, and on Paul. We couldn't plant one on Laythe and on Vall because we weren't able to get out of our cockpit. So yeah, fortunately that didn't happen, but we now had a nice view of Jool in the background. And we're now getting back here. So once we're back into the cockpit, we're now having to plan our way back home. And this is going to be difficult because I don't have a lot of fuel left. If you look on the right hand side, you can see less than 1400 meters per second of delta V that's remaining. So what I'm going to do is I'm trying to attempt a Tylo gravity assist. So I'm using the huge gravity of Tylo. By the way, you can now see the new maneuver node window on the, or maneuver plan window rather, that's what it's called now, on the bottom. And me using that to get a encounter with Tylo. So I'm using Tylo's gravity to enhance my speed, as sort of a slingshot maneuver, to get back to Kerbin. And what you can see here is the camera spinning around when I'm time warping. That was not my doing, that was the game deciding since patch 2 that this is a thing now. What's also a thing is that I can't see my trajectory here when I want to plan a maneuver. So yeah, once again I had to manually do that. So what did I do? I went to the descending node and burned in the normal direction, so I would get into the same plane as my target planet. And then I went to the apoapsis and just hit retrograde until I got an encounter. There we go, we have our encounter, and we still have 700 meters per second of delta V left. Now it's 715. I don't know what's going on with this game and delta V numbers. They're all over the place. I had over 2000 with my vehicle, then it was below 1000, then it was 1500, now it's 715. I mean, the 1500 was probably correct, but who knows? So you can't really plan for any maneuvers. Anyway, and once again, we are using the dense atmosphere of our home planet to break our orbital speeds to something, well, our interplanetary speeds rather, to a local orbital speed, because the interplanetary speed is also orbital speed because it orbits the sun and not the planet. Anyway, this is getting pedantic, so I'm going to stop right now. What I'm also going to stop is my journey, because I'm home. I can't land this thing, so getting into orbit, a stable orbit around Kerbin, was the goal, and we managed to do that. This was my first Jool-5 in Kerbal Space Program 2. It probably is not going to be the last, but it very likely is going to remain the most difficult I ever did. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel for more and follow me on my social thingies. The links are in the description. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.